was having a bout of vertigo one day, and one of you said, "You look perfectly normal." And I said, "The problem is you don't." So you get it? Audrey and I were talking about Hubble telescope this morning. You know, they sent it up. First time they sent it up, somebody made a real big mistake, and it wasn't in focus. And I think it was Jay Leno that said, and they went up later on and corrected the mirror, whatever was wrong with it. Jay Leno made the comment that Hubble was actually in focus. It was the rest of the universe that was out. So sometimes that's how it appears. And I think that's kind of how Jesus saw his whole experience when there was a point where he was talking about going into Jerusalem. He was telling his disciples that he wanted to do this. And one of the reasons he probably did is because Jerusalem was like Nashville to a country singer. It was the place where everything's happening. It was a multicultural environment that where if it was happening, it started there usually, or if it needed to be spread, it went there. And so he was mentioning to his disciples that he should go in, and they said that would be very dangerous, and it was Peter basically that said it. You remember that Jesus asked his disciples before that, "Who do people say that I am?" And they gave various examples. Peter was the one that said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus pointed out that you're seeing, Peter, this is great, you're seeing beyond the physical. You're seeing the spiritual dimension. You're seeing the reality of who and what I am. And he goes on with this little speech about, upon this church I shall build, or upon this truth I shall build my church, and so on. And so the whole Catholic Church, considered Peter as the first pope. But shortly after that, Peter's saying, "Jesus, you really shouldn't go into Jerusalem. It could be dangerous." And Jesus says to him, "Get behind me, Satan." So he goes from this very elevated state to, get out of here. You're standing in my way. But I think Jesus wanted to go into Jerusalem, and it was dangerous. And we know why it was dangerous. Jesus actually offended a lot of people. He was a Jew. We don't normally think of Jesus as a Jew. We think of him as like the first Christian, but he was not the first Christian. He was someone who was reinterpreting Judaism, and he wasn't really even reinterpreting. He was pulling from the heart of Judaism what it was all about. It was not about following 600 rules and regulations per day to find favor with God. It was a mystical awakening. It was a process, as all religions are in their purest form, a process of the individual awakening to their source. And I think this is what Jesus was all about. So what he was saying actually challenged the job security of the priests. They didn't like hearing it because it was the whole religious industry he was challenging. Because if you follow the way that he was teaching, you wouldn't need a priest. You wouldn't need the intermediate, the in-between, the go-between between us and the church, or between us and God, the church being that, or the synagogue. And that's how much of religion has sustained itself. It has made itself necessary. And the way it makes itself necessary is to teach that God is separate from each one of us. It's a paradigm of separation. And we begin with that idea that we're separate from God, and of course the whole Christian tradition, the whole Jewish tradition starts with that we're all born in sin. Because of Adam and Eve, they ate the fruit of the tree of good and knowledge of good and evil, and they were cast from the garden. And they were, from that point on, we all inherited their fall. And our work is to work ourselves back into that garden, or back into the kingdom of heaven. But the traditional mainstream Christian says that happens when you die, when you leave this body. And I don't think Jesus taught that. He said, you say there's 4 months to the harvest. I say, lift up your eyes and see the fields are white now for harvest, ready for harvest. There are several instances that he spoke that I think he was talking about. It's right here. It's here now. The Gospel of Thomas, which did not make it into the canonized Gospels, said the kingdom of God is spread out upon the earth and men do not see it. I love that. It's like it's all here. And you think about this world we live in, you think about this universe we live in, what about it would be incomplete? If it's incomplete, then it wouldn't be working. But it's working because it is complete. And it's working quite well. The human being is the only one with the ability to imagine it is incomplete. There's something wrong with this place that we live. There's something incomplete about God's creation. It's not done yet. And there is a constant expansion, a constant movement. There's no doubt about that. But when you think about in the cosmos, what needs to be fixed so it will be done? It doesn't even make sense. We say, astronomers tell us that it's expanding. It's always expanding. There's actually 2 ways to science takes 2 views of this, and the Big Bang theory, as you know, is the one that it dominates. But there's one I mentioned a couple weeks ago about, it's called the steady state, and it says the universe has no beginning and no end. That it changes, it goes through changes, but it is eternal. And Albert Einstein actually embraced this idea for as long as he could. He wrote another final paper about the steady state being the appropriate one, because he just did not like this Big Bang thing. And the astronomer that coined the term Big Bang, Fred Hoyle, he did it in jest. He did it as a joke. He was an advocate of the steady state theory. And I like that idea. I don't know if it's right or wrong at this point, according to common thinking now that they've shoved down our throats. The Big Bang is the way to go. I think they're going to find that that's like the flat earth one day. It's like, we get so latched onto these things, and all the scientific community says this is how it is. And so we teach it in our schools, and our kids grow up believing that, and it may not be true at all. They believe the earth was flat at one time. I ran across some maps. Well, some people still do. There's a flat earth society. Can you believe that? Are any of you in that? Maybe I shouldn't be too critical of that, because it could be, but I don't think so. We've seen it from outer space. And I don't know what the value of doing that is, but there's a whole bunch of people that say that believe that. So we go through all these things, and I forget why I got off on that, but Jesus was challenging the status quo. And so it was dangerous for him to go back into Jerusalem. But his attitude, I think, I've always appreciated this. He said, no, we're not going to cower from this danger, this potential danger. We're going to go to the place where it will be most effective, where my teaching will be most effective. We're going to do that. And you can go with me, you can stay here, do whatever you want. I don't think that's in the Bible, but I think that's what he was thinking. Because that's what he did, and that's what the whole Palm Sunday thing is. He was entering Jerusalem, they threw the palms down, and they all saw him as this Savior they were looking for. The Jews were looking for the Messiah to ride in, not necessarily on a donkey, but actually a donkey in that day is a symbol of royalty. It's not, we don't think of it in the same way today as it was then. But the people that were expecting the Messiah to come in saw him as a military figure. He was going to rumble in, and change everything, the oppression of the Jews, and make things all right with them. And he didn't do that. He rode in a very humble way. And so all of the thing was very dangerous for him to do. And they were all cheering him on, and we don't know how much of this is actually factual and how much is not, but they were cheering him on as he came in. But it wasn't too long after that where they were actually acting like they didn't know him, and that's a very interesting change. Here's my Savior one day, and the next day, I don't know this guy. And what that does, the reason that happens is because they didn't get what he said. The kingdom is not in me, it's in you. That's what he's saying. You want to find God, don't look at me. Look within yourself. And you'll find God. You'll find what you're looking for. You don't have to practice all these rituals that you're told to practice. It's not, God, it has nothing to do. It's not what goes in your mouth or what comes out of it. That's what matters. And so he ran to, not from. And that's kind of what I'm talking about today. And I love what Emilie Cady writes here. She's my mentor, one of the first Unity minister, she was not a Unity minister, she was the first Unity writer that I discovered when I was age 16, and it changed my life. But she says it is perfectly natural for the human mind to seek to escape from its troubles by running away from present environments, or by planning some change on the material plane. There is no permanent or real outward way to escape from miseries or circumstances. All help must come from within. Let me read that again. It's perfectly natural for the human mind to seek to escape from its troubles by running away from its present environments, or by planning some change on the material plane. There is no permanent or real outward way of escape from miseries or circumstances. All help must come from within. So when you read that, you might have a twinge of guilt for thinking about, I don't like where I am, so I need to move. I need to change. I need to do something different. I don't think that's what she's saying at all. Because all of us change. We go through changes. We go down the road in our life, circumstances change, and we may move. We may do something different. Jesus was actually making a big change. He was going from maybe a comfort zone, a safety zone, into Jerusalem, which in a sense could have been a death wish, perceived as a death wish. But the issue is not that we make changes, but it's why. Are we running from rather than running to? Just a switching of a couple of words has a whole different meaning. Am I running from, or am I running to? So the message she is giving here is run to, not from. But I like that she says it's perfectly natural for us when we're in a situation we don't want to be in to want to bail out, to get out of it. Who doesn't? It's usually our first thought, I wish this wasn't this way. I wish this wasn't this way. What we're doing in that moment is we're looking at ourselves and saying, I don't have the ability or the personal resources to handle this. So I wish it wasn't this way. If I had the resources, it wouldn't matter. I'd handle it. But I don't seem to have them. So I wish it wasn't this way. How many of you have ever wished it wasn't this way and it wasn't that way anymore? Wishing is kind of a weak approach. It doesn't ever change it. If it changed things, it would work. I would have changed a lot of things because I have wished a lot of things would go away. So we're actually, when we have that attitude, we are evaluating ourselves. We're looking at our arsenal of the things that we have on hand as the way to battle the problem. We're not thinking of potential. We're not thinking of ourselves as spiritual beings. We're thinking totally from the self-image. I don't like this thing. I don't know how to handle it. I wish it would go away because I don't have the resources to deal with it. What she is saying here, there is no permanent or real outward way of escape. And escape is the key word. That's motive. I want to get out of here. I want to escape. So we look at our motive. Am I running from or am I running to? That's the most important thing. It's not, would I like this situation to change? Of course I would. But to run away from it is probably not the answer, because we won't pull out of ourselves the additional resources needed to deal with it and to deal with something maybe later on. But there's no permanent or real outward way of escape from miseries or circumstances. All help must come from within. What does that mean? Does it mean that if you need $10,000 to solve a problem, a very real problem, that somehow that $10,000 is inside of you? What is inside of us is power, is intelligence, is life, is love. It's potential. It is saying yes to my ability to run to, not away from. I don't know what to do in this situation, but something deep inside of me does. And I'm committed to bringing that out. I've shared with you the several times the experience I had where my life was just crazy. It was falling apart. And every day I would pray that it changed. And just to make a very long story short, one day I sat down to do that, to meditate, and realized it didn't matter if it changed or not. Why should I let all that decide how I'm going to feel? I was looking outside for answers. I was looking outside beyond what I owned, what my self-image could handle, saying, I need somebody else's stuff to help me resolve this problem. But that day, it was like a whole light came on and it said, it doesn't matter. You're going to be okay. This too shall pass. You don't have to keep running from this. You don't have to keep letting that tell you how you're going to think and feel. You don't have to let that keep defining you. You're a worthless nothing that is powerless to do anything about anything. That's how you feel when you're afraid. But that day, something bigger than me, something larger than myself, my self-image, said, you don't have to back up. You don't have to go one step further back. You've got everything you need. You just say yes to it. You agree to let it express through you. And it will. It may not do it all at once. What we do is we look at our problem and we want to resolve it. We want to resolve the next year's worth of problems. Actually, we're usually doing that. If I could just resolve the next years of problems, I would have one of the best years of my life. That may or may not be true, but it's impossible. So why even think that way? It's not possible. We don't live a year from now. We live right now. We're here. If you got a problem, it's right here. If you have a solution, it's right here. It's all right here. Nothing changed in my life that day but me. Something woke up. I found my power. I found my center. And so I got up, moved through the situation, kept getting worse, worse, worse. I kept thinking back to that moment when I said, somebody told me it was going to be okay, but it doesn't look too good, and kept going back to that. But I kept also anchoring myself in that feeling. And just one thing after another happened. It unfolded in a way that I never would have planned out. I wouldn't know how to plan that out. But it worked in a way that worked out. Much better than I would have planned out, actually. Because I wouldn't have thought as large as the answers that came. I was thinking crumbs, and it was presenting me with a full meal. But it had to unfold a moment at a time. And that's the important thing. When you're in something that is just totally taking your attention, totally terrified by it, if you can pull yourself back, that's what Cady's talking about. All help must come from within. It starts with you solidifying, with you knowing, I don't know how this is going to work out, but it is. It'll be okay. That's divine intelligence working through you, unfolding each step as it comes. And it's really hard to trust that sometimes because it doesn't look like it's working. But then you back up, think a little bit about this universe we live in. Does it need help? It's doing a pretty big thing, without our help. I think it's interesting that our scientists are studying, they're looking at asteroids. I talk about this once in a while. The more they see, the more worried they get. It's like we didn't worry about asteroids before we started observing them. Now we're trying to figure out how to divert them. But what if two come the same day? We send up one rocket to try to divert one of them, and the other one gets us. That's what they say about life. Life is what happens when you're making other plans. So we try to work all this stuff out in our brains, but the universe is working pretty well. It's keeping all this stuff going. But we have, with this imagination we've created a world that is not part of the natural cosmos. It's our world. It's our projection. And that world's all messed up. And there isn't divine order always in that world. But that's what we have to remember. That world doesn't exist. It's a projection. What really exists and what is working is that cosmic clockwork that is working in each one of us. We're an expression. How do you live? How is your existence even possible? We don't even know. How do I get up and live each day? What is it that's making me do that? How do I do that? How do all the cells in my body know how to do what they do? If I cut my finger, how does it know how to fix that? There's an intelligence that's not part of our conscious thinking. It's not part of our problem solving. In its mind, problems are already solved. Before you call, I will answer. That's what that means. The cosmos is done. All the answers that we seek are here. What we are looking for is a certain unfolding of events when God is saying, it's not that you're looking for, it's your center of power. I gave that to you, you have that, and you're not utilizing it. You're giving your power to the thing out there, the problem. So that's what it means to pull yourself back, realize that you are complete now, that the universe is complete. Whatever you need to address this issue is unfolding right now. Just like whatever happens in this universe tomorrow is unfolding right now. But when you think about that, everything that is happening in this vast cosmos is happening now. And it will only happen now. There is no future. There is no past. It's not operating in time and space. It is fully operative in this now moment. That's where the whole spiritual principle, that's what it rests on. One presence, one power. There's not this mishmash of things happening. There's one thing going on, and that is an unfolding of greater good. And it's working through us now. So while it is a knee-jerk reaction to run away or to, try to solve our problems in some other way by making changes and so forth, the place you start, and this doesn't mean you won't change, the place you start is to find your center of power. That's your natural essence. Life, power, love, intelligence. Those are the four fundamentals of your being. And if we are worried, if we're confused, it's because we've gotten off that base. If you say, I don't know what to do in my life, affirm infinite intelligence. You're connecting, you're aligning yourself. That's what the word prayer means, to make an adjustment. You align yourself with what is true. And what is true is infinite intelligence is you. It's expressing as you. If you feel like a dummy, that's self-perception. That's not true. It's how you see yourself. It's not what is true about you. And we all have those things, that's identifying with the self-image rather than the soul. And this whole spiritual deal is about getting back in touch with our center, with what is true of us at the deepest level. So most all of us have dreams and desires that would have us leave one condition and move another, so that's not the issue. It's motive. It's always a good thing to get in touch with our motivation for making changes. Am I running to, or am I running away? And if you're running away, as I was doing in the illustration I gave, in a very real sense, I'm running away because I wish that was different. I don't want my life as it is. I want a different one. You're running away from your life, from where you are at this moment. You run away until you find your center of power, and then you say, I'm okay, and I'll do whatever I need to do to move through this. It's a totally different thing. You're not saying, I wish my life was different. You will make your life different, but you'll be different because you're different. Because that difference starts with that awakening, that center that you find. We might be running from an inner call to come up higher, to begin filling the undesired condition from within. And that's really it. When we are feeling fear and we are running away or want to run away, we're not listening to the call of spirit, which always says come up higher, run to, not from. When we are tempted to run away, it's because we're identifying ourselves as the ancient Israel did when they went into the promised land, and the 11 spies said there were giants in this land. They saw us as grasshoppers, and we saw ourselves as grasshoppers. When you are feeling fear, you're in your grasshopper self. You're identifying yourself, defining yourself as a grasshopper, as one who does not have the power that you're actually endowed with. And there's really not much God can do about that, except make you miserable. And by that I mean the universe doesn't stop. It keeps pushing. And you feel this dissatisfaction. God speaks to us probably most of the time through the voice of dissatisfaction. And why is that? Because we've defined ourselves as a ball with certain abilities when we're infinite. So we're trying to be this ball. And the infinite life force, the creative life force, is pushing always outward, expanding. And we feel this unrest, something's wrong, something's not quite right. And that's a natural response. Dissatisfaction is the voice of God. We want to hear God say, well, do this, turn over there, go get that place, you'll get this job. We want to hear God speaking whole sentences like He used to do in the Old Testament. But God is speaking to all of us all the time. Fear is another way God speaks to us. And the way that is translated is fear is a self-definition that doesn't work. It's not true. So what do I do to get over my fear? I go try to fix that thing over there, or I redefine myself. That's what Katie's saying. It's like running away is dealing with the thing out there rather than dealing with my self-definition. Does that make sense? It's like we fear because we're in an artificial definition of ourselves. Your soul cannot fear, has never known fear. And we find that hard to believe because we've known fear. And we have identified with fear, and we have created a lot of our life around fear. But your soul has never known 1 second of fear. That's what John tells us. 1 John, God didn't give you a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power and love. So when you are afraid, you're not being true to yourself. And I'm speaking of all of us. So we want to pull back, and we want to get into ourselves, get to that place in ourselves where it's okay. Everything's okay. We know it's okay. It's going to work out. But I want to experience my life from that center of power. Not hope that I can go get it from somebody else or something else. Dissatisfying conditions are like a half glass of water. We want a full glass, and so we set aside the half empty glass and pursue one that's fuller. That's feeling powerless and going outside to get the fuller glass or sense of power. It may be that we need to fill ourselves rather than seek another glass. And that's true. It's a kind of an old metaphor that we've used several times, but if you have a half glass and you put it under your faucet, it's going to fill up and then start spilling over. And that's what we want. We want to spill over. We want to get past our self-definition, the one that is seeing the world in such a limited way. Because remember, this universe is done. If you're looking at things saying something needs to be created or concluded or whatever, Jesus said, whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe that you received it. I think he was locked into that understanding. The universe is done. Believe you've received it. It's act as if it's already done. So when I moved to that place in myself, that place, that center of power, that's how it was. It was like, it doesn't matter how it worked out. I'm okay. That's the answer I was looking for. That's the answer we're always looking for. Am I going to be okay? So when you touch that place in yourself and you know you're going to be okay, then you'll work out the details in your life. It may be all today. It may be take a year, maybe take 10 years. I don't know. That's not what's important. But what's important is to know you're okay, is to find that place in yourself. And it's sort of connecting, the glass with the faucet. It's putting the glass under the faucet. We've got that eternal life welling up within us, that source of power. When Cady suggests that help must come from within, she's pointing to the idea of beginning right where we are. And just think about some problem you have or had, or just some illustration, that we always want to make our life something different than it is, different from what it is. And that the answer, when we pray, the answer is tied up in that whole thing. And if we can learn to let that go, to say, I don't know how this thing is going to work out, but I do know it is, because I'm okay. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that shift in ourselves where we know we're okay. Instead of constantly mulling over our circumstances, we focus on letting our inner light shine. And that's actually easier done than said. Talking about it is one thing. It's very easy to sit down and let go. It really is. We don't know how easy it is until we do it. If you're going through something right now, do this. Go home, sit down in a place you won't be disturbed, and just say, I let go. Everything's okay. And get to the point in yourself where you know that. It's not just words. That's denial and affirmation. Denial is release. Release the appearance. Release the energy that you're giving the thing. Affirmation is touching your center of power. I know I'm okay. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I know it is. That's, we think denial and affirmation is words. It's not. It's action. It's the activity of letting go and centering in that place of power in us. That's the affirmation. You may need to make some changes in your life. Nothing wrong with that. But you want to make changes that help you reestablish your inner strength, your center of power. First change you might need to make is swear to yourself you're going to stop worrying. You're going to sit down, you're going to let go, and you're going to find that center of power. That would be the first change I would recommend. You can tell me your problems, and I don't know how to solve your problems, but I do know how to solve this one, and it's the main one. If you see yourself as a grasshopper, you're going to approach whatever situation you're in as a grasshopper, and grasshoppers aren't real good at solving problems. They see everything as bigger than them, I assume. I don't know how grasshoppers see things actually, but I know the metaphor. It's saying that we see ourselves as something less than we are. So we start with ourselves. Pour the full force of your being into regaining your inner point of strength, and you'll find your circumstances begin to look a lot brighter. And they do. Your prayer will be answered immediately, and the details will work themselves out over time. All right? Simple enough, right? Okay. Thanks for coming out, and we'll see you next week.